We need better standards of discourse in Australia, and more intellectual rigour and curiosity from our media, as two stories of two different women on opposite sides of the debate about Israel, Palestine, and Gaza illustrate.
Deborah Conway has been a pillar of Melbourne's music and art scene for over 45 years, and in December of 23 gave an interview that plunged her into the heart of the debate over Israel and Gaza. Her treatment was described by Sky News in their landmark documentary on antisemitism in Australia as one example of what antisemitism looks like.
Not only were Deborah and Willie doxxed, they were also cancelled.
They were cancelled, but not, as suggested by Mr. Frydenberg, for being Jewish. Ms. Conway's religion has been known to Australians since her debut in 1979. She wasn't outed in December 23. Ms. Conway gave an interview with Patricia Karvelis and was asked about artists wearing keffiyehs after the performance of Chekhov's The Seagull at the Sydney Theatre Company, which you may recall caused a minor scandal back in November 23.
Should you be able to protest about something that you feel passionately about? And is that something that you can hijack another work of art over?
Now, leaving aside the irony that The Seagull may in fact be the perfect event for a quiet demonstration of artistic rebellion against a seen but unspoken, unjust, or even horrific reality, which some might say is what the play is all about, what got Ms. Conway in trouble with social media was her use of the word hijack. Because to people who are old enough, hijacking, keffiyehs, and the PLO are all indelibly linked in our memory. So the verdict for many people was that Ms. Conway used that word as a sly Islamophobic insult. If these were written remarks, a good editor might strike the word hijacking. But no reasonable person listening to Ms. Conway could say she meant anything other than what she literally said. Unfortunately, social media being social media, the remark went viral, and what is worse, it did not stop there. When asked about the death of children in Gaza, she prefaced her remarks with these unfortunate words.
But kids, lots of kids. I mean, we know they're not Hamas, right?
Well, it depends on what you call kids.
Now, let's be clear. She went on to explain that in her mind, a 16-year-old with an assault rifle was not just a kid, but also a combatant. Which is fair enough. Most Australians would probably agree. But on social media, the statement
depends on what you call kids,
taken out of context, can mean all sorts of things. Is Deborah Conway suggesting Palestinians aren't kids?
Well, it depends on what you call kids.
As she was preparing for an interview,
on the day of the interview, I was told via the publicist that the producer had just arrived back from overseas and I was too hot property, too controversial to have on a light entertainment show.
Ms. Conway understandably didn't find that acceptable.
Deborah Conway went to the press and the interview eventually took place.
Deborah Conway did say some controversial things about Gaza which are worthy of criticism, and as a public figure, she should not be above it. But like all of us, has the right to be criticized for what she said, not for what she didn't say. The reason it's important to be precise about what happened to Deborah Conway, that she was canceled not for being Jewish, but because her words were taken out of context and misrepresented, is that had Mr. Frydenberg and the team been forced to do that, they might have been more sensitive to the irony of what they were about to do in that very same program to another Australian woman, Newtown MP Jenny Leong.
She stood on the
Jewish lobby and the Zionist lobby are infiltrating into every single aspect of what is ethnic community groups.
Here's New South Wales Greens MP Jenny Leong.
Their tentacles reach in to the areas that try and influence power, and I think that we need to call that out and expose it.
Just as with Ms. Conway, obviously this is an unfortunate choice of words. Were they written remarks, an editor would change them. We all know it's out of date to call pro-Israel lobby organizations the Jewish lobby, although we also know many Jewish supporters of Israel who simultaneously insist that Jews who don't support Israel are an ignorable fringe. And of course, one shouldn't use the word tentacles in a conversation about the influence of such organizations. We get it. But just as reasonable people can apply common sense when listening to Ms. Conway's use of the word hijacking, reasonable people can apply common sense and understand that tentacles in this context, which was a free-form remark in a panel discussion, is simply a synonym for influence and reach. The very influence and reach that members of said organizations do not deny having achieved.
If we have influence in certain segments of society, whether it be business, the arts, the legal community, academia, it is because that influence has been earned through our blood and through our toil.
Fair enough.
And it is time, I believe, to exert that influence.
Also fair enough.
Across all sectors where Jews have influence, we need to bring that influence to bear.
Again, fair enough. Nobody's begrudging. But if it is anti-Semitic to even talk about it, and what it means, well...
It's not like with the Nuremberg Protocols. It's talking about how a lobbying organization uses money.
Perhaps somebody should have informed former Age editor Michael Goenda before he went off and wrote a whole book about the subject.
We're not getting pushed around anymore.
Isn't that awkward? But Mr. Frydenberg and his team were in no mood for giving Ms. Leong the benefit of any doubt.
Tentacles. It's a despicable, anti-Semitic slur that evokes memories of the Nazi era.
The thing is, there's something about this cartoon we suspect Mr. Frydenberg does not know, but which we think adds interesting color to the whole story about what happened to Jenny Leong. Because this cartoon is from 1941 and appeared in the German satirical magazine Die Brennnessel, whose cartoonist, an Austrian by the name of Josef Planck, was not targeting Jews or Jewry. The cartoon is about the British Empire, whose figurative tentacles are wrapped around the globe in search of oil, which you can see there as a black blob, positioned with surprising geological accuracy. The head of the octopus is Mr. Planck's attempt at Winston Churchill, which you probably recognize now that I've pointed it out to you. And the Star of David over Churchill's head is there because that's how Nazis often portrayed Churchill, with a Star of David halo, because of the standard German propaganda trope about Churchill being backed by globalist Jewish financial interests. So of course it's an anti-Semitic cartoon, because Planck, as a Nazi, was an anti-Semite. But the target of the cartoon was Winston Churchill and the British Empire, not Jews. And those tentacles are the tentacles of the British Empire.
So the question for us is,
why was an obscure cartoon locked away in the archives of the Library of Congress on people's minds in 2024? Where did it come from? Why this cartoon? Perhaps, and we emphasize perhaps because we can't know, but perhaps it's because this is the cartoon pro-Israel commentator Eve Barlow used to accuse Greta Thunberg of also making a Nazi reference. In her case, by placing a stuffed octopus on her knee in this photo expressing support for the people of Gaza and Palestine. To our knowledge, neither Ms. Barlow nor anyone else has ever produced any evidence supporting the allegation that said octopus toy was anything other than what Ms. Thunberg said it was. A stress relief toy for autistic people. Did Ms. Barlow care?
They don't care about whether it's true or not.
You have to know that that's the goal.
Find a way of delegitimizing and censoring people.
Does she care now? We can't know. But if Ms. Barlow's goal was to cause distress for Ms. Thunberg, she succeeded. Ms. Thunberg took down her post and spent months denying the allegation, which would not go away.
If it serves the cause, it's true.
Because you don't have good argument.
You cannot allow them into a big tent.
If you've noticed not hearing much from her since October 23, maybe it's because Greta Thunberg, once a darling of the left and its media, is now well and truly out of the tent.
I know that mentality.
The move is always to basically turn attention away from what's actually happening.
Turn the subject to the accusers, not to the accused.
And turn it into a question about the motivations of the person who is making the criticism.
All we know is that whatever one thinks of Ms. Thunberg, of her politics, of her tactics, nobody deserves to be slandered the way she was. What's more important, Ms. Barlow could not have done it alone. The reason the attack landed, the reason it was so distressing for Ms. Thunberg, is that reporters and others kept asking her about it. It is they who made the charge impossible to ignore. Otherwise, it would have just been another baseless claim on the internet. It was weaponized because of the complicity of a whole lot of people who we think should have known better. We wonder whether Guardian reporter Tamsin Rose should also have known better. She described Ms. Leong as, quote, referencing an anti-Semitic cartoon, unquote, when it is self-evident that she did not reference said cartoon. Mr. Frydenberg did.
Tentacles. It's a despicable anti-Semitic slur that evokes memories of the Nazi era.
In another article, Ms. Rose says the cartoon, quote, depicted Jews as an octopus, unquote, which is ironic now that we all know the cartoon does not depict Jews as an octopus. Ms. Rose thought it depicted Jews as an octopus because Josh Frydenberg thought it depicted Jews as an octopus. Why? Possibly for no other reason than that Eve Barlow did when she used it to hurl a cruel charge at a young autistic woman.
If it serves the cause, even if it's not true, it's true.
Push the young kids, teach them how to defend by attacking.
All this would be comic if the effects on real people, real Australians, were not so hurtful. But Jenny Leong is not Deborah Conway. She did not go to the press because there was no friendly press to go to. In Australia, it's The Guardian that's supposed to be there to give people like Jenny Leong a fair go.
I have absolutely no illusions in The Guardian. None whatsoever.
There's no positive profiles of Jenny Leong.
The Prime Minister hasn't extended her any human courtesy.
She's not in any photos striking an indomitable pose. She's not defiantly proclaiming her refusal to shut up. Unlike Deborah Conway, Jenny Leong cannot take for granted her right to be treated fairly, but she should. Everyone has that right in Australia, or they need to if we're going to make any progress towards social cohesion. And let me be clear, both these women have views which are controversial, objectionable to many Australians, and are absolutely worthy of scrutiny and critique. They are public figures. They're both fair game. But people should be scrutinized for what they say, not what they didn't say. Deborah Conway has that right. Jenny Leong has that right also.
I certainly think social cohesion is on the ballot paper.
If it was, the voters of Newtown spoke, delivering a 10% first preferences swing towards Ms. Leong, more than doubling her margin to over 24%. Let that sink in. Perhaps the most high-profile Jewish Australian leader since Monash, a man who many people I know have been saying for years is PM material, and very well still could become Australia's first Jewish Prime Minister, a man of such caliber has publicly accused an Australian politician of what would have to be, if true, the single most offensive thing any Australian politician has done in modern memory. More extreme than anything even our most self-described right-wing politicians have said or done. And after a media frenzy that was presumably distressing for Ms. Leong personally, voters in one of the most progressive divisions in Australia voted for her anyway. How should we interpret this development? If we presume that the voters of Newtown, which for anyone outside Australia is like our version of Haight-Ashbury, or Berkeley, or the south side of Austin, let's presume that voters in that community did not just vote for someone they believe might be a secret Nazi. What then? Would we not have to conclude that they said to Mr. Frydenberg, "We don't believe you," about a serious charge of antisemitism? What a terrible foundation upon which to confront antisemitism at a time like this.
Turn the subject to the accusers, not to the accused.
As we've said, that's not going to work anymore.
You have to know that that's the goal. You have to expose these people. You cannot allow them into a big tent.
She's specifically talking about anti-Zionist Jews right there. But the fact is, they are already in the tent. Gaza has done that. It has brought hundreds of millions, if not billions, of people around the world into that tent, and they are talking about these things. Nobody controls access to the tent anymore. There are too many ways in. Each of us can only decide whether or not we choose to participate.